Good morning. I'm Jessia Dumas. Thank you so much for joining us at Insights Inc., where I am connecting with some super amazing Indigenous professionals, artists, entrepreneurs, and just really great people all around, and really creating a discussion in the time of reconciliation. So I'm a professional life coach, I have an online coaching program. I really believe in mentorship and creating opportunities for Indigenous. And in Manitoba, one of the things that we're talking about is that the Indigenous population is the fastest growing, and mostly in Manitoba. So it's such a great place that we're starting these conversations and really having this talk of reconciliation. So in this process, it's also so interesting for a lot of people to learn that many Indigenous people are learning about their history for the first time, as well as Canada learning this history. So it's a really, really interesting time. And it's a really interesting time for all of Canada to be talking about the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. And so that's a lot of what I do in my training and my facilitating. And I've taken this extra step in connecting with these people to ask them to share some of their journey stories so that we can share with young people what some of those journeys look like, what some of the realities are that we're dealing with, and just really have this conversation. And so I'm happy to be doing it in this way. So today I'm going to invite with me, I'm very excited to invite someone who is a media artist, someone who's won several awards and has so many amazing talents that she's going to share with us. And I'm going to invite her in right now. Oh, where is here we go. See, technology. There she is. Okay, Jules, good morning. How are you doing?
Doing great.
Great. So thank you for spending time and doing this with me. So I shared with you that I'm in Winnipeg, and that's a little bit about me. So tell us about you.
Well, I'm out in BC. I'm in Vancouver right now. I'm in my second year of my PhD in the Gender, Race, Sexuality, and Social Justice program. Just waiting for the announcement that I've reached candidacy. So I'm very excited. It's been 2 years.
Congratulations.
In Vancouver, yeah, for sure.
So I was going through your bio, and you have done so many things. You've won awards, Award of Distinction, Director Chairs Program, all of this stuff. So what got you started in the film industry?
So I started as a performance artist. I was an actor back in my teens and then my early 20s. But what I found really a huge challenge was the roles. The roles that I was getting were, they were just not what I was expecting, and a lot of stereotypes and so forth, right, being an Indigenous actor. So, I just continued on doing what I was doing, but I was not pleased with what I was auditioning for. And then I saw a need for more Indigenous storytellers, so that I decided later on in my 30s to be behind the camera as opposed to being in front of the camera.
So changing that perception of what those roles were?
Yeah, like the roles that I think, they were stereotypical, they were degrading, they were nothing that, after spending years in school or training and going out there in the industry, and this is the early 90s, and then, just not getting those leading roles and so forth. They were just, they were not so great, to put it nicely.
You're creating that place for more like realistic visions of what Indigenous and Indigenous women are.
Exactly, and more empowering, like, more of the truth, more of what and who we are as, Indigenous women, I think was necessary, but that's not what I was finding in the early 90s. Mm-hmm. Obviously now things have changed. We have more Indigenous storytellers. We have more, producers who are Indigenous and so forth. So the industry is changing for Indigenous women for sure nowadays. But now I'm in my mid-40s, so, even that's a little bit more difficult now being an actor, right? So I don't even know if I would go back into the, being into the camera.
I think it's important to recognize that it's people like you who have contributed to these changes, right? So way to go. That's incredible.
Yeah, and I think it just came out of the fact that I was frustrated and, I was hoping for something better. And then at the time, there wasn't really that much, you know, for Indigenous people in general, right? So, you know, it's all the stereotypical roles and so forth. So I think the more that we have, you know, Indigenous people in those power roles or in those producer roles, then things will change, right?
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So tell us a little bit about your childhood. Did you grow up in BC? Is that where you're from?
No, I'm actually a band member of Attawapiskat First Nation in Northern Ontario. And I lived with my grandparents in Moosonee part-time. So we were there when I was really young. And then my mom moved south for employment. So she moved to Ottawa. And then later on, I went to Montreal and Toronto. And now I'm out in Vancouver. But my home community is Attawapiskat, Mushkekowok territory in Northern Ontario.
Wow, great.
Yeah.
You go there in pursuit of your career in film?
Pardon me?
Did you go to BC in your pursuit for film?
No, I actually just moved here like 2 years ago. So just to start my PhD. So I was actually in Toronto, in Montreal, not so much in Ottawa, like the film industry when I was younger. I mean, there was a few things here and there, but I had to make the big move to Toronto when I think I was 19 when I was there the first time, and then I moved permanently when I was 23, I think. I can't remember. Yeah, so in my early 20s, I actually moved out to Toronto because there was a lot more opportunity and a lot of Indigenous theater and so forth. So there was, you know, there was a big shift happening.
Mm-hmm. Wow, so you left home really young. So that
I actually moved out of my mother's house in Ottawa when I was 16. Actually, I think I was 15. Oh my gosh, I've been on my own for a long time. Wow. But then, you know, later on, you know, when I was a single mom of 2 boys, Attawapiskat and Mohegan in my early 20s. So then my grandparents and my mom moved to Toronto with me for a while to support me. So
that's great. Family is amazing.
Yeah, it is. Like, you know, especially when you have kids and you're really young, you know, you're just kind of learning yourself. So it's nice to have that extended family for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So why acting when you were young? Why and what kept you going?
For me, it was like being able to play somebody else, like just kind of getting out of my own lived reality for a while and just being creative and creating new characters. And I just found that so fascinating. Like it was so much fun just to be something other than what you are. So, yeah, I don't know what it was. Ever since I was a kid, I remember I was in grade 4 in elementary school, and I made this play, and I got the whole school involved, and then it got all out of hand, and nobody knew what the play was about. Neither did I, but but I knew, like at a young age, that I loved the performance. You know, being a performance artist, and I loved, you know, the arts in general, and I was always painting and drawing, and you know, it was just a way for me to kind of, you know, explore my imagination in a way.
Yeah. I think many people they really underestimate the value that the arts community contributes to the overall economy, right? Like so many times cities will have guests come in to see a show, whether it's a live show or even a movie, right? Entertainment.
Right. Yeah.
And they're spending money on hotels. They're spending money at restaurants and transportation. Like so much money goes into arts, but arts isn't really credited, I think.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as artists, and I know many other artists also, you know, are frustrated that they're asked to do things for free, you know, and we still have to pay our rent and, you know, pay our monthly expenses. So, I mean, I think we need to honor our artists a lot more, and we need to engage with them and you know, honor the work that they're actually doing for the community as a whole, right? Like, because we challenge, you know, we're always challenging. We're speaking to political issues, social political issues. We're speaking to many things through our art practice. So I think, you know, I mean, I do things, you know, obviously I do things, you know, on a volunteer basis because I love the art form that I'm involved in. But I think also it's nice to be able to pay rent and survive as well, right? Because you're right, like we do contribute to the community as a whole, and economically as well. Like people travel and people want to see what's happening in the city, and usually artists from that particular place are speaking to that lived experience of that place as well, right? So
yeah, definitely. So it says on your bio that you are the storyteller in residence with the Vancouver Public Library. What does that mean?
So I just finished that residency. So I was there at the Vancouver Public Library for 4 months. And so I did a number of events. I did storytelling chats. So I had like patrons come and actually speak to me about their projects that they were developing. I went to all the branch visits, like I did branch visits all around the city. I got panels together with other artists and so forth. So it was very, very busy. I enjoyed it very much. It was a lot of traveling, like around the city and so forth, and getting other artists involved with the library. But it was just such an amazing experience. Like what I found, what was really interesting to me was the word storyteller. I think what happened quite often was when I was out, doing an event, people would be bringing, they would bring their very, very young children or babies with them, thinking that I was going to perform. And then I was thinking, well, I'm talking about, decolonization. I don't know if your children are really going to be interested in that, but you can say. But it was this, this idea that as Indigenous people, we're here to perform for settler Canadians, which is kind of strange in a way. Like I thought that was really interesting that happened often, that, people thought I was actually going to just start performing. And I was like, storytelling, for us, I think, or for me, I believe, the story carries agency, and that story is the soul of our community. And some stories are sacred. And, yes, there's performance, that goes with story at times, but not all the time, right? So it was interesting. It was a cultural kind of misunderstanding, I guess. I don't know, but it happened quite a lot. And I was thinking, I'm not dancing for your babies.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really, so I think that word storyteller is loaded. And I think across the country on Turtle Island here, we all have our understanding of what a storyteller's role is within our communities.
For sure. So I love that you're in that realm and doing that thing or that style of work, because that, I believe, it's so valuable, and people like myself are learning much of it for the first time. But I want to go back to something that you said for a second. So you used the word decolonization. Right. And I have a general understanding of it, not that I use it, but can you talk a little bit about what that means to you and with your teachings?
I think for me, it is like, that's a thesis question for PhD. Just to kind of like touch upon it, for me, I was raised by my grandparents on the land. They were still hunting and trapping. We didn't have water. At times we didn't have electricity, so I was with my grandparents, when my grandmother was making moccasins and so forth. Like, so we survived off of my grandmother's craft, her arts, and my grandfather was hunting and trapping. So he was selling hide and so forth. And we were always cleaning the hide. So that's how I actually grew up with my grandparents. So when I think about decolonization, I think, well, I did have this existence with my grandparents. I did live this way, like, we didn't, I don't think my grandmother held a job, or maybe she did part-time, I'm not sure. But like the money, the revenue that we had as a family came from, selling stuff to tourists. And we didn't even need that really, because we lived off the food that my grandparents hunted, right? Both my grandparents were hunter and trappers. So, and that was only in the, in the 70s. So not that long ago. And then, I was introduced to city life when my mother moved south for employment, because she's a residential school survivor. So her education, I think, went up to grade 5 or so forth. So my mother was working hard labor jobs in the city. So I kind of had this understanding of both worlds. And I don't want to separate the world, because, my mom is part of that as well. It's just that her experience was very different because she's a survivor or warrior. So anyway, when I think of decolonization, I think it's fully loaded, and I think it's a way of changing our mindset and understanding Indigenous community and understanding Indigenous culture and who we are as a people, our identity. I I think it's thinking beyond the colonial systems, if that makes sense. You know, the Indian Act and the reserve system. I think decolonization is just kind of, you know, challenging, you know, what we've been taught, you know, within the educational system, like, and how as Indigenous people, you know, we're still being governed by an Indian Act. You know, that's, I think we have to rethink as a people as well in terms of our identity, and really go back to the old way, which is, you know, kinship and, you know, and how we view family and community, if that makes sense. Tried to wrap it up nicely in 5 minutes, but
yeah, I realize it's a really good question, but it's definitely an important question, right? So
right.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your most recent project.
Right.
And is it called What's Your Story? And it's about hair carries memories.
Oh, right. Right. So I just finished a film called NiiSoTeWak, produced by Shirin Van Houten, and it's a VisJuelles production film, which is my company. And we did a short doc with CBC Shorts. And, you know, at first they approached me and they wanted to have something really lighthearted. And I had submitted something a while back and I was like, great, let's do something on the twins. So that article that you're actually talking about is part of, you know, an add-on basically for the film itself. So how I see, you know, the hair, what I've been taught by many of my elders and along my journey is that hair represents spirit. And my twins are going to be, you know, 12, 13 soon. So they're at that age where they're going to be cutting their hair and starting a new journey as adults or young adults. So, you know, I think it's really important to share these parts of our culture, not necessarily the sacred stuff, not necessarily the stuff that we consider sacred, but more just to kind of a general idea of our cultural practices and so forth. So, you know, CBC actually did another piece too, where my blog, where it was talking about, you know, the importance of twins and twin identity and who we are as twins and how we understand twins. So yeah, like I kind of bring in cultural aspects into my work as well as a way to inform and educate. But also, I also make the work that I do for Indigenous people, not necessarily for settler Canadians, but it was funny because I was talking to someone from CBC and they're like, you didn't make this movie for me? And I was like, well, no, you can totally watch the film. That's wonderful. But when I make films, I always think about our Indigenous youth, you know, to feel empowered, to feel that strength and that resilience, because we're still here and we're still practicing our, you know, our cultural practices and so forth. So to be proud of that.
And that culture, that's sort of, people are trying to find that, right? They're trying to, how do you identify who you are? Because, for example, for myself, I know that it wasn't until I was an adult, it wasn't until 2005, actually, when my brother was killed by the police in Winnipeg, that I started learning about cultural things. I received gifts such as eagle feathers, braids of sweetgrass, and honor songs, and still today, right? Still trying to identify, well, how much of that can I claim, right? Because then there's a lot of issues that go on in the community and lateral violence and that sort of thing. But why not, right? These things have been taken away from me. And I think that many people are now trying to find that culture and find that identity in the confinement of the Indian Act and stuff like that.
Yeah. And who's policing you? Like, as an Indigenous woman yourself, you have a right to that. That's yours. That's your ancestral tie that no one can speak to, only you. So I see it beyond like the living. I see, you know, our spiritual, like our ancestors in the spirit world as well, that guide us and who are with us. You know, whenever I'm in a challenging situation or something, I always think of my grandmother standing behind me, even the ones I haven't met, you know, and that's my right as an Indigenous woman. You know, I have a right to that. And I kind of, you know, pull away from people who feel that they have the right to police me as an Indigenous woman, because they don't know my family, they don't know my story. And that's how I was raised by my grandparents, Like my grandmother was like, don't judge anyone unless you've walked in their moccasins. Don't think or don't assume you know that person's story. And don't even try to tell that person's story. Like, speak to your own truth, you know, and you'll find your path. And that's, you know, one of the teachings that I got from my grandparents. And I'm so grateful, you know, and I do understand, you know, that there's other realities, you know, being Indigenous and so forth, and how we were impacted by colonial violence. I understand that, and I acknowledge that because my mother is a survivor, right? But I also have this other reality where I was raised by two Cree traditional people. And it's funny because as a light-skinned person too, I walk that line, right? When people meet me, they don't necessarily know that I'm Indigenous. So it's a strange life. I always say that, you know, I'm a trickster's joke in a way. You know, like my existence has been quite interesting because I was born, you know, with light skin and red hair and birthmarks around my eyes. And my mom was like, whoa, whose baby's this? You know, and I was born up in Northern Ontario. So, but it's been an interesting life and journey so far. You know, I'm grateful. And I really, just based on having this light skin privilege or passing as white too, like it's really made me think critically about what identity is. And, you know, and I used to work in social services as well. I used to run a women's shelter, and we used to have a lot of clients coming into the shelter who felt they didn't have a right to identify because they were in foster care or they were adoptees and so forth. And I was like, no, like, you have the right. It's yours. That's your ancestral line. Claim it. You know, make the ancestors happy because you're here because of them as well. So they're happy you're here. And, you know, and I think we have to welcome people back into our communities. I think that's what we need to be doing, you know, like.
It's very moving. I really, really appreciate those words.
Yeah.
And throughout, you know, the past 5 years or so in my journey, connecting with many people who, you know, will almost secretly, not really secretly, but sometimes it feels that way, that they're telling me, well, I'm Aboriginal, but I don't know anything, right? And so it's almost like that where I was several years ago, right? And it's and not everyone welcomes that, but I really appreciate, because I try to do my best, right? And ever since I've been learning, I try to share what I'm learning, because most of all, I'm so excited to say, wow, did you know this?
Yeah.
Did you know this history? Yeah. And then, you know, me trying to encourage other women. I mean, of course, because it's mostly women that I'll connect with on that level. But yeah, that's such a great message. That's your right. That's your right as an Indigenous woman to claim that.
Exactly. You know, and I've worked with Indigenous women and children for most of my career in social services. So it hurt me. It hurt my heart that women would come in and they felt that they didn't have a right to that. Like that just, it really did break my heart, because it's like, I wanted them to understand the colonial violence, because it kind of reminds me of my mom too. Like my mom not understanding what happened to her in residential school, and, you know, still thinking, well, it's just because I'm an Indigenous person, it's because I'm Native, right? And I'm like, well, it goes way beyond that, mother. Like, we have to talk about this. We have to talk about what this actually means, you know, and break it down. And that's how you decolonize, right? You have to understand the system itself and how, you know, it's impacted Indigenous people of these lands, right? The Indian Act is like, you know, basically rewards of the state. So, you know, and, you know, to access our resources, and we were basically in the way. So we have to understand it in order to break it down or dismantle it, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Great.
Yeah.
So what's something that you would say has been your best accomplishment?
My kids. You know, I think about this quite a bit, because when I was in my early 20s, you know, I had to put my career on hold as a performance artist and so forth, because I was a single mom of 2 boys, right? And, you know, there were times where I was like, oh, I can't do the things that I want to do because I have no support system. And, you know, I was struggling as a young mom. And, you know, now that I'm in my mid 40s and I have 4 sons, like I have, my oldest is going to be 23 in a few weeks. And then my middle child's like 21 and the twins are going to be 11. I'm like, I'm at a good place, you know, like I think I didn't get to all the places I wanted to be in terms of my career, but I'm raising 4 amazing boys, you know, into Cree men. So I've done, like, for me, it's like, my kids are my lifeline. They're my heart and they're my soul. And, you know, it was hard. It was really challenging, but to see these boys, you know, who are respectful and amazing and who know their culture and who are strong, like, for me, that's my best accomplishment. accomplishment thus far. So
yeah, I can totally relate. I have 3 boys. And
you know what I'm talking about.
they're right now 19, 13, and 10.
Right.
And definitely struggling. And one of the messages that I kind of want to get out right now with young Indigenous women with children is almost that, I don't even know, I kind of speaking before I thought so much about it, but really the support that we need to offer and the support that we need to reach out with, right?
Yes.
Because as a mom, first of all, and I was talking with another mom at the school this morning, it comes with so much guilt, right? You can never do enough for your kids.
Yeah.
And that's something that we have to learn to cope with and accept ourselves, right? But then at the same time, I think we should not let, as much as we give our children what they need, love, home, all of that, security, but not feel bad about wanting to do something for our spirit, right?
Yeah. And what I find interesting too, like I am the daughter of a residential school survivor, so that comes with, many, many, many experiences, you can imagine. And I think when I became a mom in my early 20s, like I was like 21, I was just a kid myself, and I didn't understand how much I meant to my children, if that makes any sense. Like that was a whole learning curve for me. It was like, wow, like I'm a mom. What does that mean? Like I was raised by my grandparents as well. So that kind of gave me some kind of inkling in terms of how to parent. But I was also raised by a woman who was institutionalized as well, right? So not a lot of affection and so forth growing up. Like our house was very militant. Like we got up at a certain time, we made our bed, we did this, we did that. Like it was so like, regimented. So to have these 2 experiences, I didn't really know how to be a mom, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I just thought, okay, I have to do a lot of homework here. I got to figure this out because I have 2 little guys who are dependent on me, and I was so young. But I think, I just didn't understand how important I was to them. I don't know if that makes any sense, but maybe the self-confidence wasn't there, and I was struggling myself in terms of, how I was going to take care of these 2 little boys. But now, being in my mid 40s, when I see my kids, I do realize I'm important to them. Like they need me, and that it's hard to articulate, but I'm just at a different place being a mom right now than I was, 23 years ago. Mm-hmm. I did a good job. I think I could have done a better job, and there's that guilt you're talking about. It never ends, right? You're just so self-critical as a mom. It's just, you try to do the best that you can for your kids.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for sharing that, because so in some of the training that I do, and I do a workshop that I call Indigenous Insight Seminar, and in the workshop throughout the day, we talk about the treaties, Indian Act, residential school, and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
Right.
Of course, throughout the day, a whole bunch of other conversations come up, right? But those are the 4 topics that I try to give people a basic understanding. So it's more like an intro, right? You know nothing. Here's a bunch of info that will shock you, right? Because people always leave, and I say their lives are changed.
Right.
And I get such great feedback. But the first time that I had a residential school survivor attend my workshop, I was a little scared because I thought, we're going to be talking, and I talked, there was 2 of them, a male and a female, and I talked to them beforehand just to give them a heads up, just so you know, this is what we're going to be talking about. I'm open for you to correct me. You know, if at any point you think that I should be doing something different, tell me. And I was very open to that. But people were really kind of surprised to say, like, oh my God, there's survivors here. Like, they're real people, right?
Yeah.
It really changed the dynamic, which was really amazing. And then at the end of the day, I was really pleased to hear that each of the survivors were saying to me that they're thankful that someone is sharing this message. And to me, that meant the world, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's pretty amazing that someone like you is taking that knowledge and that experience and being that direct descendant, that child of those survivors in the family. So way to go.
Thank you. It's a hard story to tell, you know, and I haven't even fully explored or articulated my experience being the daughter of a survivor. And there's a lot there, and I haven't even gone into that yet. And, but I think, you know, the more we talk about it, the more we, you know, find safe places to actually have these dialogues, you know, the healing will begin, right? And I'm not saying there's going to be, you know, an end point for the healing, because I mean, it's intergenerational as well too, right? But I think we need to start having these conversations, and they're going to be hard. They're going to be hard conversations. They're not going to be easy, but they're necessary.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So let's go back a little bit again, just to say, in your journey of wanting to be in film, wanting to be in the production realm of this industry, what was one of your biggest obstacles that, if you were to see someone now, some advice that you would give to them?
Before you go into film or media, make sure that it's your passion, because there's going to be times when you don't make a lot of money. So I think, you know, if you're going to choose this as a career, that your heart has to be into it like 100%, because it is challenging it is challenging at times, because you're basically living from project to project. And I think that's why I was working in social work as well, part-time, and also being an artist part-time, so I could actually survive. But I think you have to really be passionate about this industry, and, you know, being a storyteller. And, you know, because there are times where you're just like, wow, I got $500 to make a film, or I didn't get that funding. And, you know, you're just going from project to project, like I said. And it's nice, I think, for me, being a mom, I always had a part-time job, like in management or doing something in social services and stuff, because that's also my other passion. So I was able to balance. And being a mom too, like, I don't know how I got here. I just did. Like, it was that drive, right? It's like you wanting to do something so bad, you wanting to fulfill that part of your life. And I think that's what, you know, drove me to where I am today, is just that passion, for sure. And I think, you know, and also there's a social responsibility as well too, as a storyteller. Like, you know, you're working in an industry, mainstream, you know, as well. So you're faced with a lot of these stereotypes and all these barriers. So part of your work is to dismantle it with your own story. And I think too, this is also really important, is that, you know, I don't always want to be in a place where I'm responding to or resistant to. I want to be in a place where I'm just speaking my truth, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. So, you know, keep that in mind too, that there are going to be times when you're going to be responding to stuff, but that doesn't have to be your whole arts practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So before I let you go, can you talk a little bit about that passion, you know, that passion that keeps you going? Because I myself, as an entrepreneur, and at times I may have not described myself as an artist, but then working with some artists, realizing that creativity, that's, you know, it's okay to say that, right? And there are times where, yeah, it's definitely a challenge and a struggle financially, but I have this, like, fire is the best way to describe it, to just doing what I'm doing, right? No matter what. And just have fun. Like, to me, that's so important. So what is your drive when it comes, like, inner being stuff? What is that for you?
I guess, you know, I always tell my children, if you would do it for free, then that's the job for you. And I would do this for free. I mean, I would find other ways in which I have to survive and sustain myself. Yeah. But it's something that, for me, that creativity is what feeds my soul, right? It feeds my arts practice. That creativity, or being free to be creative through your work, is like, it's like the most rewarding thing in the world, right? Other than having your children or family, but you know, I'm talking about just in terms of your career, right, or your practice. So. I don't know, the fire, like you said, yeah, that's what it is. It's a fire. It's your soul, right? It's whatever you do to feed your soul. Like, it makes you feel good. It's like you know, when you're hungry and then you actually have a nice, great meal, like, that's what it feels like when you birth a project, or you are, you know, in a creative process. It just feeds you. I don't know how else to articulate it, but It feeds you spiritually, mentally, physically, you know, all parts of the self. Like, it's just satisfying. Like, you know, and you would do it with, you know, without pay if you could. I mean, or if you would. Sorry if that makes any sense, but yeah. Yeah.
It's sort of a scary thing to say. I would do it for free, but I won't.
But it's so funny, like, but just the fact that you actually get to pay sometimes is like, oh my God, like, this is amazing. Thank you so much. I would have done it for free. You know, tell people that after a while, though, right?
Great. So what are you seeing in Vancouver with regards to reconciliation?
That's a good question. I've been here 2 years. So I think the, you know, the Aboriginal Storyteller in Residence is a really great program. And they've been doing that for quite a few years, you know, at the Vancouver Public Library, you know, and I think there's a lot of amazing academics out here. I think that, you know, just the whole community as a whole, like, you know, seeing, you know, art by Indigenous artists around the city. I don't know, just, it's a different vibe, I think, you know. In terms of reconciliation, I'm still trying to figure out what that means for myself, you know, and trying to understand, you know, I've been doing my part, and I know a lot of other Indigenous people like yourself have been doing your part in terms of informing and educating. So now I think it's time to see it, you know, reciprocity in a way, so that we're not always the ones having to do the work. Be nice if our allies stepped up and, you know, did some of that educating as well. So not just leave it up to the Indigenous person, because we're actually speaking to our reality in terms of the Indian Act and so forth, and, you know, the colonial violence. So it's nice to have our allies jump in and speak up as well. So when I think of reconciliation, I believe there's accountability there. You know, there needs to be accountability in terms of settler Canadians. I don't know in terms of what's happening in Vancouver, but I mean, it's a different vibe, definitely, from Ontario. So people seem a little bit more informed, or maybe I shouldn't say that, or the people that I've met seemed more informed in terms of Indigenous arts and so forth here. So, or there's more of an acceptance. Yeah, in Ontario, I think, you know, every province is different. I found that I was still dealing with a lot of, you know, racism and stuff. But things are shifting, definitely.
Good. So great. Thank you so much. So your newest film, where can that one be found? How can someone see that?
So NiiSoTeWak, NiiSoTEWAK, Two Bodies, One Heart, can actually be found at CBC Shorts. It's online. And then there's a blog that I've done. And there's also the piece from Krista Couture, who wrote about the hair, the cutting of the hair. So there's a few pieces that you can find on CBC, but I also have another film called Placenta, which is an interesting film that you might want to watch as well. It's online as well. You can just look it up on YouTube and then just put Placenta with Jules, and then you'll see this whole film about Indigenous birthing ceremonies and so forth.
Excellent. And your business is called?
What's that?
Your production company?
Oh, VisJuelles.
VisJuelles.
Yeah, it's a whole long story. But, and also you can catch ASCII Boys, which is my TV series on APTN, and we also have it on ASCIIboys.com. So if anybody's interested in watching my two older boys struggling their way through finding culture and connection, it's a great show to watch.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'm so fascinated by everything that you're doing. And I know that it's not an easy life, but it's a life of love, right? Yes, I love what you're doing. I'm very inspired. And thank you so much for spending this time with me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we'll talk with you very soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Wow. That was amazing. That was Jules. Jules Koostachin. So really incredible. I'm going to post those links for her. But if you were inspired by this conversation, I hope that you will continue to come back and watch Insights Inc. every Friday morning. You can find the collection of the interviews on my YouTube channel where you'll have found this video. And I have a weekly newsletter called Insights Inc. And if you go to jessicadumas.com, you'll find the Insights Inc. Link, and you can sign up there sign up for the webinars. And thank you so much for being a part of sharing this this time with me in this time of reconciliation for Canada. If you are interested in contacting me for a sponsorship opportunity and having more people hear this message, then I would love to hear from you. Either way, I want to hear from you. So thank you so much for watching, and let's chat again soon. Bye.